Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 27th of April of 2026. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where during the previous 24 hours the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions significantly. But before we start with the situation on the ground, I would like to discuss with you one of the most important updates as for my opinion. Vladimir Zelensky has submitted to the Verkhovna Rada draft laws extending martial law and mobilization in Ukraine for another 90 days starting from May 4th. So today is the 27th of April of 2026, the Monday, and according to this report, according to the situation, the next Monday, the war in Ukraine could be finished. But today Zelensky submitted to the Verkhovna Rada these two laws to extend the mobilization and martial law for another 90 days, and now everything depends on the Verkhovna Rada, because saying the truth, they have possibilities and they have the right not to extend the mobilization and the martial law, and this means the end of the conflict. So let's wait and see. The Verkhovna Rada, the Parliament of Ukraine, has just a week, more precisely they have just 5 days for this process, but probably they will extend everything tomorrow. Now let's continue and let's discuss the situation in Ukraine. During the previous 24 hours, as we discussed during the previous video, the Russians carried out a massive attack through the entire territory of Ukraine using 94 drones, and lots of explosions were recorded mainly through the northern parts of Ukraine. Explosions were recorded in the area of the city of Chernigov. We have a video where we can see a strike and then an explosion somewhere in the city. We had lots of updates about the situation in the area of the settlement of Karyukovka. It seems that this settlement was under very heavy fire from the Russian side. In this video we can see the consequences of attack, black smoke over the settlement. Here we can see most likely the building that was destroyed by Russians, some warehouse or maybe even ammo depot. Here we can see the moment of an attack that took place during the night. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians attacked several objects on the territory of the settlement, and they are located in the central part of the city. Furthermore, the Russians, as we discussed, attacked the city of Shostka. This time the Russians were attacking a gas station. Another gas station was destroyed on the territory of the city of Sumy, and many other different objects of energy and critical infrastructure of Ukraine were attacked and probably even destroyed during the night. Another important area is the city of Odessa. We have already discussed the situation, but during the day we received additional details about the targets that were attacked by Russians overnight. In this video we can see the moments when the Russians attacked an object of infrastructure of the territory of the city, and later we received this video where we can see that as a result of attack, the Russians attacked the city of Ilchevsk, Odessa Oblast, and a sunflower oil spill occurred in the port waters, destroying a 6,000-ton oil tank. A slick approximately 400 by 200 meters appeared on the water's surface. So the Russians attacked, as you can see, a very important object of economical infrastructure of Ukraine. We have covered most of the updates regarding the massive attacks, and now let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Sumy direction, where during the previous 24 hours the Russians improved their positions. The Russians improved their positions in the north. The Russians advanced in the direction of the second defense layer between the settlements of Khotin and Pisarevka, and it seems that the Russians are planning to establish complete control over these territories. They're planning to create the situation like this, to take under complete control at least the northern parts of the settlements of Khotin and Pisarevka, and if the Russians are able to do this, then the Russians will be able to cut logistic lines that go from the city of Sumy in the northern direction towards the line of combat contact. So first the Russians are trying to cut this line, and when the Russians do this, they will continue their offensive operation in the direction of the most northern and the northeastern parts of the Sumy direction. We're talking about the city of Sumy with the purpose to maintain the lines and to answer with big forces the Sumy forest itself. Furthermore, the Russians continue offensive in the northeastern direction. This morning, the Minister of Defense and the group of forces north stated that the Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Taratutina. And based on this report, we have adjusted the map, and these are the changes between the dates. The Russians continue offensive, and as we discussed, according to this configuration, we can say that the Russians managed to cut the settlement settlement of Novodmitrievka in pincers, but as for the settlement of Novodmitrievka itself, no changes on the ground were recorded during the previous 24 hours. Now let's move further. As for the Kharkiv direction, probably the previous 24 hours were the first 24 hours when we haven't received almost anything from this direction. Neither artillery strikes, nor APV drone attacks, nor additional changes on the ground and so on. Either there are very heavy clashes right now, or indeed the Russians are regrouping or conducting a final or a major regrouping before the beginning a major offensive operation in the direction of the cities of Bely, Kolodys and Veliki Burluk from the north. The Sumy direction, during the previous 12 hours nothing special was recorded. Probably the most important updates are coming from the Leman direction. During the previous 24 hours we have already discussed this situation, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians began a major Leman counter-offensive operation, and as a result of this counter-offensive operation the Ukrainians managed to recapture the settlements of Sosnovo, Svetogorsk. The Ukrainians managed to recapture at least a part of the settlement of Yarova. The Ukrainians answered the village of Drobyshevo and improved their positions in the southwestern and the southeastern parts. The Ukrainians counter-attack from the eastern parts of the city of Leman in the eastern direction, and the Ukrainians managed to force the Russians to fall back from this area. So as of the end of the 27th of April, we haven't received anything. We're talking about videos that can confirm this. We've been waiting for this during the day and we continue doing this, but nothing was published on this matter. But telling the truth, this counter-offensive operation is possible because the Russians, according to information we have, begun their offensive operation in the direction of the city of Barova, and the Russians, according to information we have, according to media, are trying to advance in the direction of the settlement from the southeastern direction and from the northern direction. Furthermore, today pro-Russian sources published a very interesting video. So several days ago, once again, it is a very important situation. Several days ago, more precisely on the 25th of April of 2026, one of the Russian sources, a very reliable source, it seems, published an update that the Russians, by the end of the 25th of April of 2026, had captured the territory to the north of the settlement of Barova along the river Voskol. And when talking about this situation, about these changes, we can see that the Russians, using this forest under the protection and under the cover of this forest, the Russians improved their positions and answered the settlement of Barova from the northwest. So all these words, all these statements, not about this offensive. We already discussed this situation many times. The most important thing is the reliability of a source. So this information was published by a pro-Russian source about the situation. And of course, based on that source, based on this source, we haven't adjusted the map. We are waiting for additional updates from different sources. But today, the same source published another update that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Ozerna. They published a unique video that we have already added to this map. And during this video, we could see how Russians were raising the Russian flag in different parts of the settlement of Ozerna. So this is the video, this is the situation, and according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to finish the battle for the settlement, and the Russians raised at least 2 flags through the settlement. One of them was raised in the most northeastern part, right exactly at this point, and the second flag was raised right exactly at this point. So based on this video and based on the report that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the Russians managed to establish complete control over the settlement of Ozerna on the Slaviansk Leman direction, and the same source, I would like to point to attention, several days ago stated that Russians improved their positions in the area of Barova. So which means that currently the situation between the settlements of Barova, Leman and Ozerna is very complicated, and there are very heavy clashes in this area, and it seems that indeed the Russians began advancing towards the Barova pocket. This is currently the largest pocket in the Kupiansk direction along the river Voskol. This would like to point to attention, this is a very big pocket, and it seems that obviously sooner or later the Russians would be forced to begin this offensive operation. It seems that the Russians decided to begin the Barova offensive operation right after the end or almost complete end of the battle for the eastern bank of the river Voskol. The Russians managed to release additional forces from this area because this operation is about to be finished, and they redeployed their units in the southern direction. They began advancing in this area. So that is why the Russians decided to use the Leman forces and the Leman reserves to support the Barova offensive from the southeast, and the Ukrainians decided to use the situation to counterattack around the city of Leman, and it seems that the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions. But we don't show that, I'm not sure that the Ukrainians will be able to hold these positions for a very long period of time, because one important thing, that this Ukraine offensive operation is tasked not to recapture all everything till the border with the Russian Federation, but to distract attention, to pin down the Russians, and not to allow the Russians to use their reserves and their forces in the direction of the Barova pocket. Which means that at the moment when the Russians break the defenses of Ukrainians in this area, and when the Russians are able to return back these forces from the area of Ushenkov and Ridkadup in the southern direction, most likely the Russians will be able to recapture everything back. Once again, as for the Slaviansk direction, today we had reports that the Russians improved their positions in this area, and now from this perspective we understand that positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the settlement of Krivoloka were encircled by Russians. Currently there is no any other option but to retreat from this area further in the western direction, and if Ukrainians retreat from the settlement of Krivoloka, they will lose control over the strategical elevation in this area that is located along the river of Seversky Donetsk, and from these strategical elevations the Russians will continue offensive operation further towards this big forest and towards the western parts of the river of the city of the village of Alexandrovka. So the battle for the Leman direction, the battle for the Nikolaevka direction is coming to its logical end, which means that in coming days, in coming weeks, we'll see the beginning of the battle for the city of Slaviansk, and it seems that indeed the battle for the city of Slaviansk will take place this year. Not the next year, but this 2026. Another important direction that was where the Russians started their offensive, where the Russians have started their offensive recently, is the Kramatorsk direction. During the previous days, lots of changes on the ground were recorded in this area, and today we have additional changes as well. So this is the situation by the end of the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th. The Russians created a very powerful foothold on the Ukrainian side of Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, and it seems that currently nothing can stop the Russians, and they will continue offensive operation further in the western direction. According to information we have, the Ukrainians began redeploying additional reinforcements and reserves in the direction of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal with the purpose to stabilize the situation, but it seems that the Ukrainians are late. The Russians began bombing and attacking them with artillery, trying to force them to fall back from this area before the Russian troops entered this territory as well. The Constantinovka direction, these days the Russians are very active in this area. These days we have lots of changes on the ground, and it seems that a turning point occurred on the territory of in the battle for the city of Konstantinovka. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. As you can see, during the previous 72 hours, the map has been adjusted significantly both from the southwestern and the northeastern and the eastern directions. So these are the changes on the ground. In the western direction, the Russians managed to cut off 520 road, and it seems that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the settlement of Dovga Balka, where the Russians during the previous week many times proposed the Ukrainians to surrender. Currently, we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians accepted the deal, but obviously now we see that that offer probably was very good. As of the southwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka, today we have changes in the village of Ilinka. These are the changes on the ground, and according to mainly pro-Russian sources and neutral mappers, as a result of clashes, the Russians finished the battle for Ilinka, and probably the next days the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm this information. Furthermore, the Russians continue improving their position significantly on the eastern flank of the city of Konstantinovka. Here we have also lots of updates that were published and confirmed both by pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian sources, and we see that the Ukrainians are losing the ground, and they're losing the ground very, very fast. Furthermore, the Russians continue attacking positions of the armored forces of Ukraine with aviation, with bombs. During the previous 24 hours, lots of updates were published from the southwestern and the western parts of the city. Lots of explosions, lots of destructions, lots of bombs, and lots of attacks per record from the Russian side. Based on these videos with explosions, with attacks, we can make a conclusion that the Russians are intensifying the pressure just with one purpose: to force the Ukrainians to fall back. And the Russians will continue offensive operation, and in coming days will receive additional changes on the ground. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dobropolye direction. During the previous day, nothing special was recorded, and the same story is about the Zaporizhzhia direction. We received lots of videos, but probably for the first time since the beginning of this year, we haven't received anything when talking about changes on the ground. The only changes we received from the settlement of Novopavlovka, and several pro-Russian sources stated that Russians improved their positions in this area significantly, and by the end of the 27th of April of 2026, the Russians control up to 50 or even more % of the settlement. As for the Zaporizhzhia, currently the biggest number of updates are coming from the southern parts of the city of Orekhov. Maybe the Russians began an artillery preparation before the beginning of another offensive operation in this area, so who knows, maybe in coming days we'll receive additional changes or additional updates from this area. But at this moment we see that the Russians are still on the line between the settlements of Gulyaye Polye, Verkhnya Tersa and Vozdvizhivka. During the previous 24 hours, just a video was published from the area of Vozdvizhivka where we can see how Russians using FPV drones were attacking the edge positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in this region. Now we have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, and now let's talk about the conflict in the Middle East. According to information we have, as for the conflict of the Middle East, during the previous 24 hours, the most important updates were received from the territory of Russia. Today, according to information we have, there was a meeting scheduled between Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi and Putin was scheduled. And the sources reported that the meeting would take place in the area of the city of St. Petersburg. And later we received the report on this matter. We start receiving updates and videos of how the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran arrived in St. Petersburg. Today, a meeting with Vladimir Putin was scheduled, the different sources stated. This is the moment when he arrived, and then he went and met with different delegations, and later we start receiving updates and different statements about the meeting itself. So this is the moment when Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi met with Russian President Putin in Russia. That was a very long and interesting, most likely productive conversation and talks between Russia and the Iranian side. And right after the end of the meeting, the President of the Russian Federation stated that Russia will do everything in the interests of Iran and other countries in the region to ensure peace in the Middle East as quickly as possible. So the Russians, they're shown their positions, and they shown probably and most likely to the United States of America, if the conflict starts again in the Middle East, then the Iranians would be backed by the Russians and most likely by Chinese as well. As of now, there is no conflict on the territory of the Middle East, but we see that everything is moving probably in this direction. During the previous 24 hours, the foreign minister of Iran met with the Ammanis authorities, and most likely they were talking about the legislation and control over the Strait of Hormuz. Probably this is a new reality that the world is going to live in without any chances to change the situation. Another important thing is the United States of America. The President Trump today made lots of very important statements, and he also stated that he had the conversation with the President of the Russian Federation, Putin, and according to him, that was a very good talks, but the President of States didn't reveal details about this conversation. Most likely, the President Trump was talking with Putin about talks that were planned to take place today. So the situation is quite complicated, but everything can collapse very, very fast. Furthermore, as we know, and according to information we have, the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hezbollah continue clashes in the southern part of Lebanon, and it seems that no ceasefire is observed in the near future. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.